Welcome to Practice Excellence Live. I'm John Stokdyk, the Global Editor of AccountingWEB, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this second episode in our innovative new series of webcasts. Today's webcasts are all about making tax digital and are very kindly sponsored and supported by Thomson Reuters. Earlier this morning we had a session explaining what making tax digital is and the quarterly reporting regime and digital record keeping that will accompany that. This afternoon we're picking up the thread with a new panel, including a familiar face, to talk about the implications of making tax digital for practitioners themselves and how they're going to deal with their clients. So as I mentioned, I'm very pleased to welcome back Rebecca Benneyworth, former AccountingWEB editor and chair of HMRCs Digital Advisory Group. So Rebecca has been going back and forth between the tax department and the profession and small businesses, trying to open the lines of communication and collect evidence and influence the way HMRC designs a system. I'm also very pleased to welcome John Cooper from Cooper 4. John's a practitioner out there and has been reading the consultation documents and having a look at the challenges ahead and beginning to put in the groundwork. So between John and Rebecca, we've got a lot of experience here on what the system actually means and what are the implications. We're going to be looking into the sort of the longer term implications, not just how you're going to make it over the hump if it really does come in from April 2018 as intended, but what it might do to your firm in the long term, this new kind of currency of information flowing between the clients and accountants. Before we get into the detail, I just thought I'd let you know what we're going to do. So we're going to look at, say, those effects on practice and on some of the transitional issues. We also can't ignore the client factor in all of this. So then we'll start trying to be being more practical about MTD and find out what John and what Rebecca's found out about how in your own firm actually, Rebecca, how people are preparing for the changes needed. And I think possibly one of the most difficult points at the moment is what do you tell clients and when? During our earlier session this morning, we heard we are still in the middle of the consultation period, so we have an outline and some intentions from HMRC, but we don't know the detail, and a lot of practitioners on AccountingWEB are very reticent about going to their clients and communicating if they don't have the answers to the questions the clients may come forward with. So it's a bit of an airlock until the legislation appears. We think that's likely to be in December, but we're going to try and find out, even if you don't know precisely what's required, to the date and to the letter and what types of system you need to comply with, there are things we think you probably can be doing to prepare your clients. So John and Rebecca both have a lot of points to raise and insights into the issue. I'll be bringing forward ideas and comments from AccountingWEB members, and you can feed that to me as well through the chat box on the screen that you're watching this, the Cover It Live interface. You can just type your comments there. I've got an iPad in my lap here, so some of the questions, we won't be able to answer them all, but some of the questions as they come through, I'll put to Rebecca and John, and post in your questions and talk amongst yourselves during the session, because everything you say we'll pick up and we'll try and answer in the documents that we'll publish after this event. We'll have a summary Making Tax Digital handbook based on all the findings and discussions in both our sessions today. If you do miss this as well, if you can't take it in or have to go tend to some work, there will be an on-demand version of this available for you on YouTube as well. So thanks for that time. Let's get down to business now, really. I guess, Rebecca, I mean, the morning session was fascinating. A lot of the points maybe were crystallized for us by that survey of 1,000 AccountingWEB members that we did with Thomson Reuters. And out of that, the challenge of getting clients to comply stood out as really one issue. I mean, I think some of the figures we didn't have time to share this morning are still pretty shocking. The 60% of our respondents felt the clients didn't actually have software systems in place, digital record keeping in place yet. So they're going to have to take them from that into an environment where they're reporting quarterly and accurately from those systems. There's an extra workload most practitioners are anticipating. I think that was 44%. And there's something I'm calling the fee trap, because another 41% answered in a different question that there's going to be more work for them, but they're not going to be. They're concerned about how they're going to be able to charge for it. So more work, less fees. This is not a happy proposition for the profession. Other things are less surprising, but we need to tell the revenue about them, is that 69%, I think perhaps stung by recent experiences with RTI, are very concerned about the quality of the information HMRC is going to dish up. And it's not only HMRC's systems that they're worried about, it's the ability of clients to get things right at the start. And I think finally we didn't talk so much about the timetable concerns this morning, because I think we assume, and we still do assume this, right, the basis of this conversation is that it may change a little in the washing and the legislations go through, but we're going to be living with this regime before too long, and it would be pointing out to revenue that the timetable really is ambitious to the point of folly, and maybe I think as a profession we can look at what the pain points are for accountants in there. So that's my quick take. What were the points you think really mattered to you from the survey and from the morning session as well, if you want to?
I think if I pick up on, I saw a couple of questions, because we couldn't get through all of them this morning, but I saw a couple of good questions about why is HMRC starting with smaller businesses who are less likely to be able to do this and who are more likely to be digitally excluded. Why not start with the biggest companies? And I know the answer to that, and actually when you think about it, it's pretty logical that in building this new system, HMRC have got to start with something that is manageable. And actually the accounts and the data supplied by small businesses is relatively straightforward. Yes, there'll be lots of different expense categories to think about, but essentially it's pretty straightforward stuff. And so surely it's easier to start with the simplest picture and then build outwards to some of the much more complex things that they'll be dealing with when they're dealing with multinational groups. So I can see why that is. It still feels a bit painful that the smallest businesses have got to come in first. And I think another comment this morning, and borne out by some of the figures in the Thomson Reuters survey that you've talked about, John, is, is HMRC going to tell businesses about this? Are we supposed to be telling businesses about this? Because whichever way it is, they don't seem to know. And I said this morning, as somebody picked me up on it, I said, I'm telling clients that this change is coming, but they don't want to know the detail at the moment. And somebody said, well, yes, they will. I think you're probably right, but the thing is, we can't tell them much of the detail because we don't know yet until the consultation period's over. So the basics around, you will need to actually be using a bookkeeping package, or maybe if a firm actually thinks about, right, these clients, I don't think are going to manage it at all, maybe we'll persuade them they need to have their bookkeeping done in-house. I think at that level, yes. Because the quarterly updates and things like that, as I said this morning, it's all totally driven by the record keeping. And if you can get the record keeping in place, I think a lot of it will follow on.
John, I'd love to hear your reaction to the timetable issue, but maybe first, if we get you to lay your cards on the table so people know where you're coming
Sure.
from. I mean, what is your sort of overall perspective about making tax digital and quarterly reporting?
Sure. Well, I'm far from being an evangelist for HMRC, or indeed I have severe reservations about the roadmap to where it's going. But ultimately, I think that the goal of having quarterly information is a good thing. It's going to allow accountants to assist their businesses, clients a lot more by having much more up-to-date information, so they can really start to be that trusted advisor that I think clients need to help them make the business strategy decisions. Getting a box of receipts, 8 months after the tax year end, compiling a set of accounts, telling them how much tax they've got to pay is all well and good, but that's not where the real value for accountants should be. And I think our sort of accountants, our small practice accountants, have got a lot of threats, mainly from the big four coming in, moving on down. We've got to embrace this change and we've got to be at the forefront, and that forefront's got to start by communication. I was at a business breakfast last week in Hammersmith with about 20 sort of small businesses who I was a guest at. None of them knew about making tax digital, and I think that is remiss to the nth degree. Accountants should be communicating with their clients. They should be engaging their clients to participate in the consultation. To HMRC, to their credit, have made a very simple online tool to put your views in, and among those views are how much it's going to cost you as a business owner in time and money, both to implement and to keep on an ongoing basis. Unless HMRC hears from businesses, en masse, are our voices going to be heard? So the more people that actually participate can only be for the better. Yeah. So I'm really
John, I'll pick you up on that because you weren't here this morning, you were on your way here. But one of the things that Claire did say is that in the responses they're getting to the consultation on those questions, which are 42, 43, 44 in the main condoc, she said they're getting a lot of, well, it's going to be really tough and, oh dear, we're a bit worried about it, but no hard facts. Now, as I said this morning, it's quite hard to come up because you don't know what you've got to do. But if people can just even have a stab at, we think it's going to take us an extra, I don't know, hour a month, 2 hours a month, it will start to give HMRC some information, because unless they've got that information, I guess they're going to have to go with their numbers, which are that businesses are going to save, millions
and millions, by doing something more times than they're currently doing it. How do they square that circle? I don't know.
I mean, I think Chris Edwards has come through, and I think you're sort of touching on the point he's saying about how can you communicate to clients when you don't know entirely the shape of what you're dealing with. We'll get on to the communication later. I'd be quite curious to get your take on Rebecca was saying, the timetabling and things. You support the idea of it, but particularly for practitioners, it's going to start pushing you into some very painful and overloaded places.
It's interesting, the consultation documents, we've got the £10,000 and below don't have to do it, but now there is the talk of the deferral. Absolutely think everyone should be campaigning for that deferral fee to be the VAT threshold. Anything less than that, it really is going to put undue pressure both on the clients and on the accountancy practices. If say they set it at 30,000 and I had a client whose turnover was 40,000, I'd be strongly tempted to advise them to incorporate on the 1st of April 2018. Corporation tax is going down. You're actually deferring. You're deferring when you next pay tax by effectively a year. There is a great danger that the outcome of this is actually going to be rather than making the tax gap smaller, it's actually going to make it bigger because you're going to push tax back further. So only sensible starting point is if you're going to start with individuals, is to start with those who at least are engaged because they're having to submit a VAT return on a quarterly basis.
Okay, well you've sort of solved HMRC's timing issues and sorted that out. I mean, we do still have another 40 odd minutes to go, so I'll fill that out. I mean, did you have any other reactions to what you may well have been a respondent to that survey? So did any of the findings in there surprise you? I
am surprised, and we were chatting earlier, I think this may be a London-centric thing, but I am surprised at the elements of digitally excluded that my fellow practitioners have within their client base. Within ours, I think at the lowest end of sort of digital involvement, our clients will at least put information into a spreadsheet, even if it's just listing it into a spreadsheet. It's something we can then work and use and mould and in my mind that is digitally included if it's being I'm also, I think communication and the fee gap go hand in hand. Our experience of communicating with clients is they understand that if you're going to have to be involved in doing something 4 or indeed 5 times a year, there's a cost involved above and beyond doing it once a year. And again, working with the clients, I think, is the way to go on that.
I think that's quite interesting, John, because I've got a slightly different take from you, John, on this, but I think it's because most of my clients are digitally excluded.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't email. Some of them are okay on mobile phones but don't text, so quite different, but that's darkest Gloucestershire for you. But I think for me, I take what you say about doing something 4 times a year. With my clients, because their manual records are quite poor, I very often find myself saying, okay, to my member of staff, let's start again, let's get the bank statements because we know that's factual. Let's start from there and let's try and reconstruct it and get it right. And these are not clients that I haven't spoken to about their bookkeeping, but they're just not very good bookkeepers. They might be good fencers or good hairdressers, but they're not bookkeepers. That's why they're not doing that for a living. And so for me, I do see in a way a little bit of time saving in that if I can get some software that will give me a direct feed from their bank so that I'm not having to code every single transaction, I think that's actually going to be quicker than doing a lot of reworking. And certainly if you said, let's take those clients and put them onto software, the amount of rework time I would have would go up massively. So I can see for me, and I guess because my practice is all pretty small clients, different practices are going to have different experience of this and a mix of the two.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring in a question from Emma that actually does touch on what we heard about in the first session we did. Was the transitional challenge for accountants as they're working on the previous periods in self-assessment, say 2018, 2019, 2020, but then having to start bringing in the Making Tax Digital clients where they're working on a different year regime. Could you sketch out how that's likely to work?
Let's tell you what's in the consultation document, and I suspect that HMRC have probably come up with the best solution, assuming that we aren't going to shunt it all back a year, but nevertheless it will still happen. So the idea is that you will still be able to choose your own year end. You have whatever year end you want. So let's say you have a 30th of June year end. Then the proposal is that you will start keeping digital records at the latest by the first accounting period starting after the 6th of April 2018. So that business with the 30th of June year end, they will start keeping digital records at the latest by the 1st of July 2018. And they will then roll forward with those. But in the middle of that, after, let's say, July, August, September, so they'll file their first quarterly update during October. And the next quarterly update will be due during January. But with the other hand, they'll be quickly getting their records up to date for the year ended 30th of June 18 in order for that to go on their income tax return. Actually it'll be 17, but so you'll have 17 and 18 to do while quarterly updating is running alongside it. So I guess it's going to be about a year to 18 months of having two things going, which is as well as the getting people onto software, providing them with training, which we've been talking about. It's also going to be that's quite scary.
It's certainly it's put huge demands on accountants and the accountancy profession. And in the consultation document, one of the sort of money savings ideas was there'd be less engagement with accountants. But as Rebecca quite rightly says, in these first years, both for individuals and further down the line for businesses, it's actually going to be a real sort of crush of work, and it's got to be resourced.
And even if HMRC take allowance of your suggestion and the one that is really gaining currency within the pressure of delaying it to the VAT, you're still going to have the transitional, like that parallel period of parallel processing.
I mean, I don't know all the numbers, but I was reading a Lloyds Bank report on digital capabilities, digital maturity, I think they call it, in the business sector. And one of the figures that jumped off the page at me is that 1.44 million small businesses have no digital capability whatsoever.
Really
that is shocking. And all of those potentially or a very large proportion of those, are faced with digital record keeping, including, we had a couple of questions this morning, are landlords in or out? Landlords are in. At the moment, if their gross rents are more than £10,000, or if they've got self-employment and rent added together, less than £10,000, they're out, but beyond that, they're in. I don't think landlords have got the first idea. So, but I'd just pick up on your VAT limit thing. Is it delay those so that those under the VAT limit come in later, or is it say, well, actually, let's set the floor at the VAT limit, get all that running maybe for a period of a few years, because the rest will then, I think, will follow, simply because once I've got a system set up to be dealing with businesses in a particular way, I'm going to encourage my clients to say, look, this is the way we do this in our firm. What help do you need? What support do you need? Okay, that's how we run. And I think, that's what it'll do.
I mean, there is an argument that, we could go, call for like a soft launch where people who want to do it go in early and others. I mean, I think those arguments are happening as part of the consultation process, and we come to AccountingWEB and carry on. But maybe let's get back to the nuts and bolts and the impact on practice. John was saying John's clients, he said, wouldn't really be digitally excluded, or if they were sort of digitally disadvantaged, or his solution is an Excel-based tool, which the future of which is moot, I would suspect, with the.
To be fair, I did say the tool was going to be a sort of a repository to feed into whatever the software is going to be at the end of the day.
But we know from AccountingWEB and previous conversations there just how many small businesses are using it. That is still numerically the most popular accounting application in the country. What's your insight? You've heard some of these conversations. What do you think will happen with the spreadsheet solution?
See, I'm an Excel lover myself. I have not only, got Excel spreadsheets running for clients. Not many of my clients can use Excel, but I've got Excel spreadsheets running and I use them in a number of ways. I understand what HMRC's problem is with it, and that is that HMRC, and it's in the early part of the main consultation document, bringing business tax into the digital age, they've said that an important part of this for the government is that closing the tax gap will give some money, which we'll be paying for the 1.3 billion it's going to cost to write all these new computer systems. Now, a lot of that money is predicated on people make mistakes and going to be driven, the recovery, if you like, is going to be driven by nudges and prompts. And by that, we didn't get into this morning, but what I say to people, what I envisage is that it will be something like you'll put in £700 and code it to taxi, and then the software will say, oh, are you quite sure that's rather a lot of money for a taxi? And you'll say, oh no, I meant £7 or whatever. And I can envisage that that's where we're going. Certainly not there yet, but I think that's where we're going. And I think HMRC are probably right, certainly with the unrepresented. That will drive more accurate records and possibly an uplift in tax, possibly. But if you think about the spreadsheets, I mean, I've got N, where N is large. You've probably got an even bigger N, number of different spreadsheets for different clients, and therefore adding APIs, application programming interfaces, into spreadsheets is going to be very difficult. I did hear from someone, they were actually talking to Microsoft about this, so if Microsoft can't crack it, then no one can. And I'm pretty impressed actually, HMRC aren't mucking about. They're going to go, and maybe Microsoft will write an add-in, but it seems to me a real challenge, and almost, is it time for us to step away from the spreadsheet?
Yep.
I don't know. I think you're right. It can be.
Microsoft won't be so keen on that.
No, absolutely. It's in their interest to write an API. But I think as a repository for collecting data, I quite like it. Obviously, what we need then is something that's going to squirt that data at HMRC's interface.
Yeah.
But they're not going to get the upstream compliance out of that, are they? Because if the data entry is into a spreadsheet, you're back to the same question. So I can see why it's difficult, but I think HMRC are genuinely engaged on that. Because John, you said the large majority, ICAW's research in January this year showed that 50% of businesses use spreadsheets, even quite large ones. And there are I know there are PLCs using spreadsheets to drive their accounts. So
there's now definitely, it was sort of assumed that spreadsheets wouldn't be an issue. Now it's at least open for discussion and consultation.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a sense of, again, are the messages getting through to?
Oh, I think
to
HMRC really does understand how important spreadsheets are in this area. Can they work up a suitable digital solution? We'll have to wait and see. Not sure. I mean, the other reason people like spreadsheets is that once you've bought Microsoft Office, they're free. And there were quite a lot of comments this morning from accountants who want free software. And, if you charge for your services, you're going to have to pay for the tools to do it.
I mean, John, other things that, you'd speak to from the survey? That, the fee trap we touched on. I mean, maybe that would be quite a good one to open up a bit more and see, your technique will be, you've already almost introduced the idea of the regime is changing, nature of my service changing. Have you broached the fee issue, and have you, how are you navigating around that so you're not caught in the trap?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are making it fairly clear, in fact, crystal clear, that these changes, as they're proposed, would change the fee structure. As Rebecca quite rightly says, for those who have got digital awareness, that the bookkeeping costs will actually probably go down, because you can use the bank statements to roll things in, but then there's much more of the advisory side of things we can move forward with, and the management accounting. For the smaller clients who are going to need guidance and help, then there is an educational and training platform, and we're starting to sort of, as best we can, work on that as best we can, so we know exactly what we've got to sort of put in into the Making Tax digital system. But again, so fees are always going to be contentious, but I still take the view, and the feedback we've had from our clients who I accept are not necessarily demographically the same as everyone else's, is that there is an understanding that we would end up one way or another doing more work, and then therefore there'll be more fees involved.
I mean, Rebecca, John's kind of on the cutting edge a bit more, more adventurous and a proactive style of practitioner. Your client base is kind of more smaller, and there's a lot of AccountingWEB practitioners out there, or maybe more aligned to the kinds of clients you have.
Yep.
You talked about it a little bit earlier, but as far as approaching the pricing and fee, your income and your profit levels, how do you analyse, and how would you suggest the sort of smaller business accountant approaches this, avoids the trap?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to think about possibly almost segmenting your client base, so that you can start identifying, even if you haven't talked to them specifically about the support they need. If you know your client and you know their records, then you can put them in some pockets of, he's going to need me to do the books because there's no hope, can probably have a bit of a go if they're trained, and actually already probably doing enough. So you can sort that out, and then you can start thinking about changing the services that you provide from, as we've agreed, something that happens a long time after the event with no real value to it, do they? Is it valuable? If they use the accounts to get a mortgage, that's about the only value that's in it for them. So, but to actually give them real value, start predicting. You might go over the VAT threshold. You may become a higher rate taxpayer. You look as if you're heading for 100,000. So those sorts of things, as well as, for me, the driver around. One of the organisations I do a bit of volunteering with has a bar, and the chap said to me one day, "Can you tell me how much I need to turn over a day in order to cover the costs of opening the bar? Because if I'm opening the bar and I'm taking 60 quid, I'm not going to be able to cover the costs of opening the bar. So can you tell me how much I need to turn over a day in order to cover the costs of opening the bar? Because if I'm opening the bar and I'm taking 60 quid, I'm not going to be able to cover the costs of opening the bar. So I have a suspicion I haven't paid for the light, and he's a volunteer.
Yeah.
And why would you waste your time volunteering if actually you're costing money? And that's a tiny business run on a shoestring by volunteers. But actually, what a great, insightful question. And I was able to, because I do the bookkeeping on a voluntary basis, I was able to say, okay, yeah, here's sort of like your fixed costs at the moment. So until you've reached this level of turnover, I know what your gross profit is. When you hit that level of turnover, you're now making money.
Yeah.
And that's helped them decide how often a week to open the clubhouse as to whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah, and that's a
Ironically,
valuable practical.
Tracy Ashton's almost thinking along the same lines, although Tracy's kind of representing this view, very common in the first session, and sort of underlying a lot of the questions coming through is the why. What's HMRC's motivation? What are they trying to do? What are they going to do with this information? And I guess Tracy was saying maybe it's because HMRC wants to be able to forecast its tax revenues and take.
As Claire Sheehan isn't here anymore, I'm going to say I don't think they're that clever, actually. No, why is actually quite simple. They've got to have new computer systems. They should have been thrown out with the ARC. They've got to have new computer systems. They've got to spend over £1 billion on that, and they've got to make a case for it. And I'm afraid part of that digital revolution will be probably streamlining the back end so that things run a bit more by themselves. And I don't disagree with that. What I have a problem with is if businesses are going to carry the cost of that modernisation effectively by having to do a lot of this. Yep. I don't think there's anything sinister. HMRC aren't going to have transaction by transaction. They're not going to have receipts because they don't have the service base to cope with that. They probably are going to get a bit better at risk analysing businesses and spotting which businesses are way out of line with others in the sector. But I don't see a problem with that. That's normal compliance work. Just using a computer to be clever about it.
That's
which is kind of what RxBRL has done already.
I mean, as someone is worried about this MTD, this is a test being worried it's an extension of RTI, meaning more accounts of the work that you can't. I mean, I think Tess is talking to the fee trap that we've discussed. Yeah. So it's a great transition point because we've talked about, I mean, these are really significant challenges on the capacity of a significant chunk of the business population to invest all those sums and the time and the effort to bolt them, to help HMRC speed up its back end processes. I think we've identified and illuminated the very significant burden and difficulty with accountants who are going to have to manage that in their client bases and manage their own transition through a bureaucratic, transitional nightmare, and looked at some survival techniques that maybe to help you through the transition, like to sort of extend the picture just a little bit further and a little bit further out of actually. You say that this is really a huge transition for tax as we know it, the tax system as we know it. What will it do to firms? I mean, I might as well start with you, Rebecca. Sort of, how will services? We've heard a few ideas, but what will it do to the shape and the staffing and the kinds of services that practices deliver?
Massive change. I mean, I've talked to one or two people from slightly larger firms, and one particular individual who's quite a senior partner has said, transform their recruitment. Prediction for graduate intake probably next year, way down, absolutely slashed. Prediction for school leaver intake to go into apprenticeships and become bookkeepers and people who support clients on a more day-to-day basis, massive. What I'll say, John, is that any of your members out there who are a sole practitioner with no staff, my heart goes out to you because I was you until about a year ago when my daughter started working in my practice. And if I didn't have my daughter, I don't know how I'd cope with this because obviously my practice is part-time, but that actual lump of getting through all that and training clients and I doubt I'd have coped. So I'm in the luxurious position of having a fairly flexible resource because my daughter has got other things that she does, but I can pull in more hours from her as and when I need to. But Are you going to be recruiting?
I think we are. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a great team that work with us already. But I take your point on exactly. We would be looking at people to come in at that lower sort of the apprenticeship level to come in and to support and talk about segmentation to effectively have a sort of a team dedicated to supporting the, I'm going to call them digitally excluded, but digitally challenged or unhappy or nervous, if you like, and to get them through that process. So yes, it's going to be far more that hands-on spending time with them and getting people into a comfortable position using the tools that are available.
And I guess some firms might even recruit a trainer part-time.
Yeah, training and education.
To actually be running training courses for clients, whether charged for, paid for by a government voucher or whatever. I think it is that big.
Well, this is the question, isn't it? And the consultation does talk about there being some very unspecified financial assistance to get small businesses through this. And obviously it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of the consultation on that.
Yeah, I must admit I'm not mad keen on them chucking checks out because as we saw with getting payroll onto digital, that was all a bit embarrassing, wasn't it? Everybody was... Well, some people were mucking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Back to the internal processes. Both of you sort of said things to me that is point of taking on more of the bookkeeping yourself as a practice. I mean, you've started in the past year or two. Is that the same experience at Cooper Forum?
Yeah, I think it is. But we've invested heavily in software. We use Xero a lot for our clients. We use Digita accounts production. We're looking to roll out Receipt Bank. So we do a lot to make the bookkeeping elements a smaller part of our operation as possible by using the software to take on as much of the burden as possible. And there is a cost to that, and I fully accept for clients, especially those below the VAT threshold. That's probably an unsustainable cost, and that's why we are looking at, however you want to put it, Excel-based systems that we'll create that will walk through to a point from the client's perspective, get the information from the clients in a format we can then work and use with in the actual submissions. But yes, I would expect to see, as I say, having a dedicated team sort of up and running around this as soon as we know when the date is going to be. And to go back to Rebecca's earlier point, I'd absolutely agree. I think it shouldn't only be setting the deferral to the VAT threshold. It should be setting the people that are below the VAT threshold way beyond 1 year. Got to get the system's got to be up and running and working, and all the bugs and faults that we know are going to be there, and the data quality from the HMRC side's got to be ironed out first, and then we can evangelise about it and make it and sell the benefits to clients who at the moment, as you have with your clients, don't use technology for their bookkeeping at all.
So the shape of your teams is changing. The back end processes are being kind of re-engineered and new pipelines there. I'm curious, Rebecca, do you think the digital tax economy, the digital tax system, sorry, I don't get too pretentious here, will that prompt firms to just offer new kinds of services? Are there new things you are likely to have to do? Perhaps if you are suffering a little profit squeeze on the tax activity, are there things maybe that firms can diversify or do differently?
I think they can genuinely give business support, as I've been talking about, with ideas about identifying places where maybe a particular activity isn't producing the profit it ought to. And I think those are the real skills of accountants, because actually, as we've seen with outsourcing around the world and things like that, you don't actually need to be an accountant to process bits of data into software. It's actually what you do with the information when it's in there. That's where our skills really lie. And I'm actually looking forward to not pushing bits of paper around and actually saying, right, okay, do you realise this makes more money than everything else you do? Let's exploit that. Here's some information that you might find helps you manage your business better. And I genuinely believe that although that sounds a bit pretentious, large business-like, small businesses benefit even more from that because they're the guys who've got their heads their nose to the grindstone every day. They don't have time to take that step back and go, actually, what is it I'm doing right that works really well? Absolutely. They don't have that. We can bring those skills to those businesses. So I think, and it's difficult to say you can monetize that, but what it's going to do is build a much better relationship with your client, who's then going to actually see you in a different light.
And I think to follow on for that, relationship is going to be key. As I talked about earlier, the sharks, the big four coming down and pushing down on the SME sector. The one advantage we have with our clients is that they know us and we have that relationship. And if we can build that relationship and as you say, show them how to add value to their business. The one great thing about the accountancy profession, possibly more than any other, is loyalty. People are very loyal to their accountants. They don't like change, for better or worse. But we have to, as a profession, we have to give something back in terms of helping our clients down this road, a road that we wouldn't have chosen to go down, but it's going to happen.
Have you already started yourself on that, or you seem to, doing management accounts and advisory services. So you're already doing some of the things you want to do more of.
Yep.
I mean, are there things when you've got through the transition, some new departments or completely new outlets you have in mind for your services?
I think it's going to be, it's always a bit hard to know what legislation's around the corner, but yeah, I think the advisory services are going to go as a proportion of our business will go up year on year almost exponentially, but because I think that's what people are going to want effectively from their accountants. They're going to see as time changes, the bookkeeping is going to get simpler. As Rebecca said earlier, what is the point of a set of accounts 9 months after the year end other than to get a mortgage and know how much tax you've got to pay? It doesn't help you develop your business. So that's definitely where we see the business developing.
And I mean, firms are specialising a lot more. We're already seeing them being encouraged to do so. And most, in fact, I've seen survey results when we say talk to a general practitioner, they always have 2 or 3 pockets of specialisation. Are there any particular sectors do you think this will affect more? And this is a loaded question because I know, Rebecca, you've done a lot of work with landlords, and I think.
Well, actually, property landlords are one of our big. Our main 3 sectors are IT, creative, and media, and property. And again, I guess our least computer literate sector are the landlords. So yes, I think that they're being rolled into the first wave of this is probably could even be more challenging than the sole trader.
I mean, will there be packaged services for them? I mean, I could be very cynical, and I know we've been seeing a sort of the bar being pushed back against incorporation, but will there be the property incorporation package on your shelves in a year or two's time? I mean, that would be a very short-term reason to incorporate.
Well, because there are all the other things around mortgage interest relief, and there are lots of all the changes for landlords seem to be at their cost.
Mainly bad news.
Mainly bad news. Yeah. So we do look at tax efficiencies for them, and there is that sort of sweet spot where incorporation would be the answer.
Right. Okay, so I didn't mean to make a cheap joke that turns into a piece of business advice. But that's
we're never cheap, John. We're never cheap.
I'm no cheap joker. So that's always the way. Okay, well, we're getting sort of towards the end of the sort of the scheduled session, and I think we looked at different sectors, and I mean, you sort of once you get beyond the pain and the friction and the sort of unreasonable demands being placed on the professions, you both get quite excited about the sort of, it's not the end of the world as we know. As long as you can get through the transition.
I think there will be, and I think this is a point worth making, John. I know, because obviously I've talked to lots of groups about MTD. I know that there is a small proportion of our profession for whom this is the last straw. and they've had so many changes to deal with, and they've reached an age where it's not that they're not computer literate, it's just that they absolutely cannot go through major upheaval again. And I don't blame them, and that's the choice that they make. Whether that it becomes a measurable proportion of agents, because somebody's going to have to pick all those clients up, and all of us are anticipating being somewhat overstretched anyway, and I can't see thousands of new entrants coming into our market. So whether that will turn out to be something that HMRC has to say, whoa, hang on a minute, we've lost 10% of the population of small agents, only time will tell. But yeah, there will be people who are nervous about it. What I found in talking to groups is that once they know a bit more about it and they've had a bit of time to get their head around what it looks like, they're actually not as worried about it. Yes, there are things they're worried about, but they're identifiable things. Instead of it all looking like horrible, like Halloween, there is a scary clown, but the rest of it is sort of okay.
And you touch on one of my sort of pet ideas too. I mean, I will continue as the editor of AccountingWEB and stay in my day job, but I do think possibly once you know the template and you know the processes, you could construct, the mechanized small unincorporated business reporting engine and just plug thousands of clients. I think there is a play for this kind of, and I think I see evidence of people setting up practices and designing their processes for that sort of thing. So there are
if you're starting out today, what a gift, because you're not going to have to be making these massive changes. One of the things that strikes me is, unlike you, John, but I mean, I'll admit I have a small practice and I bill in February, and that's when I bill. I bill my payroll work after the end of the tax year, but most of it I bill in February. I'm quite looking forward to raising bills all year round.
Funny you should mention it, because I will start taking more questions from our members. Jenny asked, very interesting, it's on pretty much this point, about making tax digital, increasing the move of the profession towards subscription services. So rather than that.
And I think there's great scope for those who have got the stomach for it, for fixed fee work. To say, right, okay, we do, for your size of business, it's £149 a quarter or £249 a quarter or whatever, and just bill that quarterly. And actually, if you're big enough, you can soak up the lumps and bumps. It's when you're very small that becomes a bit more risky. I know there's a huge move to value billing, but actually I think clients like to know, right, that's what it's going to cost me.
They're going to know what they're going to pay in a year.
Yeah.
That's the number.
So are you moving in that direction yourself?
We are. I think we are predominantly fixed fee billing. Yeah, probably 80-20, I'd say.
And what prompted that? I mean, it's not. So it sounds like it's been in place a while. It's not your response to it.
Nothing to do with making tax digital. It's really client communication. The point Rebecca just made. Clients want to know they've got to pay £1,000, £2,000, however much it is a year. That's their accountancy fee, and we're lucky enough to have ample clients to be able to take the ones we get wrong, disproportionately underbill against the ones we go a bit over the top with.
Okay, some of the questions we've getting through, it looks like practitioners are still struggling with those transitional arrangements. So, a question about if your client is the year end is sort of mid period. How will you adjust those, and will they have to be taxed on the year, say, to 30th of April 2018? Plus the 3 quarters following that in 1819.
No, right. Let's just get that straight. The whole basis period thing, although there is reform of basis periods proposed, your clients will still pay tax based on the accounting year, assuming everyone's got a year for a minute. The accounting year ended in the tax year. So if you are 30th of April 18, that will form the basis of your 1819 tax return, but you will actually start making tax digital from the 1st of May 2018, which will run you through to your 19 year end, which will be part of your 1920 self-assessment. So I think people can sit down. We're not going to time apportion accounting periods or anything like that. You'll still have that rule that says the AP ending in the tax year is the one taxed in that year.
Okay, and for Stu M's benefit, I think so much of our conversation was been about unincorporated businesses. He was wondering, is the timetable to roll this out to incorporated businesses? So
Limited companies 2020 at the moment.
And that will be sort of their corporation tax
Yes.
element comes
Yeah.
if they're VAT registered. They're currently in the frame for 2019. Is that correct? Or
Gosh, John, you've asked me a
Oh.
really good question. I don't
Okay,
know.
we don't know.
I
Well,
don't
back
know.
to the consultation
I think,
document.
I think that's probably right. VAT goes online, goes into MTD in 19, but corporation tax doesn't go in until 20. And we've already had an announcement that large multinationals will wait until 2021. And again, not fair for small businesses here, but there's some really big stuff to tackle there. Transfer pricing and all that.
If sanity prevails and HMRC adopts John's proposal, maybe they will actually just sequence it, or they would be well advised to sequence the onboarding sort of around the VAT reporting target in 2019. That would be more. Okay, that's it. I think putting up a few years. There's questions about software, which if you asked the question about when the free software will be available, have a look at session 1. On MTD, where we covered that in quite a lot of detail with HMRC and Thomson Reuters. I think we're sort of getting to the end. So just to review, I was sort of trying to pick things up as we went along. I mean, I don't think we've cured the client preparedness problem, because that's going to always be the big hump.
Yeah.
Actually, can I ask John, are you talking to clients individually, or have you had a client session, or what are you doing?
We do. We have quite a sort of active sort of newsletter blogging forum. We've spoken to clients individually. We're going to run a webinar on it. I think that's next month. So we are really trying as hard as possible to engage. And at the moment, as I said at the start, that engagement is to really try and get them to take part in this consultation.
I'm sensing, Rebecca, you'd like to give firms some advice about getting involved in the educational process as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we haven't got a huge amount of time left,
2
but
weeks
as
from
John
today.
said, we've got 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But as well as, and I ranted about it this morning about firms getting their responses in, but even if they can just get their clients to respond to that online SurveyMonkey thing, that would be a help. And HMRC has got this idea that it's going to save millions, but they have been very honest and said, we haven't got any way of finding out the cost, please tell us. And I think that's a really valuable thing that businesses can do.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question from Jackie. We will start winding up. Jackie, and it's another year-end question, but she's wanting to know, currently all her sole traders have year-ends of 31 March. Will it be able to change the year-ends of existing clients in a way to smooth the workload? And
Yeah, you could do.
yeah.
You could do.
I believe that's one of the account simplification proposals.
Yeah, there's some
was to
quite interesting stuff on basis periods. Yeah.
If you want to make your reporting period the end of every quarter and treat that as a separate accounting period, HMRC would like to facilitate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was asking HMRC earlier. There are some areas where there's the extent to which they're telling businesses how to keep their records and sort of suggesting changes to accounting principles. It's almost like the tax tail is beginning to wag the accounting dog, but we had that again. That's a session 1 conversation. We won't repeat it here. So you've both advanced the idea of getting involved with the consultation now is a key element of your communication activity, but that's kind of struck that one off, because I think we're getting to the point where maybe we'll wind up. So it would be looking at all we've talked today and maybe some of the points that we haven't had time to raise. What would be the one thing you would say to your fellow practitioners, John, about to take away from what the things we've said and wrestled with today?
Yeah.
What's the one thing you think maybe they should go away and act on besides reading the consultation or reading Rebecca's consultation pack, the easily digested version? So beyond education and consultation.
I think it's doing nothing is not an option. If you just try and sort of take the view that it's not going to happen or it's all going to change, it will happen in some way, shape or form. It's going to happen. And if you don't, and I really do sympathise with the point Rebecca made earlier of the single practitioner on their own to take this additional workload on board. I can see it's going to be a massive challenge, but don't deny it's going to happen. And start to talk to your clients, even though there's not a lot of meat on the bones at the moment. At least let them know the process is there and it's happening, and it's the proposed time frame for it to happen. Because ultimately, I see it as our duty as accountants to make sure our clients are aware of what's going on in the world of tax and compliance. So.
And Rebecca, well, perhaps the last from you. What is the thing? Just keep in mind now.
I think keep in mind as a trainer, my approach always is, and I was taught, when you reach a horrible exam question, don't completely panic. Just try and break it down into manageable bits. So I think yes, this is a huge job, but there are things people can do now before we know any more about it. And I talked about identifying which clients we're going to need what type of support, and then starting to think about, are they going to go for a single type of software across the firm and recommend it to clients, or are clients going to be free to go out and buy whatever they want? So start thinking about the way they in the firm want to tackle it, because then they can use that to drive information out to clients about what to do, what's going to happen, and what we're going to be. We're going to be there. We're going to hold your hand. But this is what it's all about.
And we've got a solution for you. So
Yeah.
I mean, I guess from AccountingWEB's point of view, I'd probably add, we've studied the market. We sort of can see into the soul of our members sometimes, and have witnessed. I mean, I actually came into the profession just the year that self-assessment started, and then sort of 20 years later, I kind of see this amazingly masochistic pattern of those nightmare. The one benefit of making tax digital is accountants might be able to enjoy Christmas again.
That's true.
Yeah.
But that the depression and gloom and stress they go through, then always the sort of post, the good hopes to fix things the next year that then never
you
get
have done quite a bit
through.
of work on this, haven't you, John? And every February they say never again.
The thing that comes through though is that sort of a lot of practitioners allow their clients to walk all over them. They do go the extra mile to the extent that their lives are their workloads and stress are put into jeopardy by clients and sometimes by the demands of HMRC. So it's not a welcome. The timetable we've discussed isn't welcome. The burden it's going to be on business and accounts isn't welcome. But the one thing you can take out of it, it's an opportunity to sort of change the nature of the relationship, reset the relationship, and say, look, it's an entirely different system, and the one thing that's going to change is what we do. If I say I want you to use, this is the system you're using, you'll comply, and I'll give you deadlines. So,
Yeah, it is.
Get up a little bit and assert yourselves, accountants. I mean, I was hoping would like to thank Rebecca Benneyworth and John Cooper for, real frontline insight, because I think that was invaluable, like just the ideas and insights you were pulling in. But we only had an hour. It's just coming up to the end of that period. But I just hope we've opened the door that there's a lot to digest before the consultations period ends. There will be more to digest just when self-assessment season begins to get a bit lively, when the government does start putting out legislation for, that will be the draft finance bill clauses, we'll start seeing for making tax digital. So there won't be a lot of time for practitioners to get much input then. But you can start educating yourselves and research on AccountingWEB, elsewhere, Rebecca's consultation document, and all the information we've got on the page that you're watching this webcast. Again, thanks to John and Rebecca for a really stimulating little hour there. We'd like to thank Thomson Reuters for their support. And do stay tuned and keep coming back for Practice Excellence Live. The next days you're going to have sessions on marketing, on tax, and on technology for the practice of the future. So we've grappled with the big issue confronting us in the next year or two, but there's a lot more things that practitioners can look at. If you've got time besides making tax digital, keep coming back and we'll try and help you through these hurdles as best we can. Thank you very much.